Good evening, and thanks so much for your patience in kind of putting up with the delays on today's The Morning Charge. My name is Chris Kerr, and we're getting into our third episode of the mega series, Social Revelations. And if you've been paying attention to the first two, you know how much awesome information we've already covered, and you have a good idea now of the kind of information we're getting into. This is earth-shaking stuff when it comes to social media. And even the top social marketers, social network connection gurus, anyone out there who is at the top of their game, a lot of them are missing some of the key points in this. And it's causing real challenges for companies of every size to get a handle on the most effective use of their budgets and the most effective use of their people, as well as, of course, getting the right message out to the right customers and followers in social networks. It's a real tough game. And as a result, this really is a groundbreaking series, and I'm so proud and so pleased to be able to share it with you. So thanks for taking the time to watch. Today, I promise, is going to be shorter than yesterday. We're going to have some great information on a subsection, I guess, of what we've been talking about all along, which is, in this case, customer acquisition strategies. So, welcome to the Morning Charge for Wednesday, August 8th, 2012. Again, my name is Chris Kerr, and now we're into Social Revelations, episode number 3, customer acquisition strategies. So to recap, over the last couple of days, we've seen all sorts of awesome evidence that things like youth has no direct relationship with social networking expertise. We proved that one. Case closed, done deal. We took a look at lots of preconceived notions about social media, and we've proven that just about every single one of them is wrong. We've also taken a look at demographics for social media, and they've told us who we're really talking to when we communicate on those specific social networks. And that information busted open a whole bunch of social media and social network myths as well, didn't it? So today, we're getting into much more almost hands-on information. We're going to take a look at what the big companies do and what the little companies do. But when you take a look at things like your customer acquisition strategy, here's some questions that just become top of mind. Who is your customer? Where are they geographically? Where are they in their careers? Lots of different questions about who your customer is. You also want to take a look at what are the pain points your business resolves. And I'll take a moment to expand on that. There are a number of different sales strategies or techniques. You can take a look at spin selling and Basho and the challenger models and a variety of others. But they really all boil down to a couple of key points. And one of them is that people don't buy just because they want to. They buy because there's a certain built-in need, a certain pain that has to be addressed. If they're taking a look at moving from buying from one of your competitors to buying from you, it's because there's a pain with who they're dealing with that they've finally found is just too much of a frustration and they want to make a switch. Or there is an opportunity cost or some other cost. There's some point that flicks them over from being a satisfied customer of whoever it is they're buying from today into needing to buy and wanting to buy your products or services today. Those pain points, the sooner and the better you identify those pain points, the easier it will be to identify other customers who have them, and therefore close those deals better, faster, and more efficiently. You also have learned that some of the social networks we're looking at have dramatically different demographics of users and viewers. So, for example, that comparison we had between Reddit and Twitter. They're both fairly similar. Reddit's a little more volume of traffic, but they're both fairly similar in the volume of traffic that they are able to drive. But one is categorically, clearly this is male-driven, male-aligned content and male-aligned viewership. The other one is categorically, clearly female-aligned, female-driven viewership. The incomes are a little different there as well. On Reddit, the incomes tend to trend a little lower, and on Twitter, the incomes tend to trend a little higher. Education is largely the same. Reddit does trend a little higher, as I recall, but you see there are clear differences between the two, so the content that you distribute to the two of them has to be different. Or you're going to be ignoring and, to a certain degree, talking down to or talking away from a target audience, which leads to how does your message need to be presented to best reach your market. You've got to understand how those play out. And when you're really talking about customer acquisition, you're not talking about a customer who's a one-time buyer. You're really trying to build a volume of business that you can rely on over and over again. You need to plan for the long term. How are you going to engage these people for the long term? Now, we're not actually going to stop and talk about specific tips and tricks on content. That's not what this particular show is about. And we're not going to really get into tools and strategies for building that long-term part. Not today, at any rate. But we will talk about how these key questions impact what businesses are doing today with their strategies, so you can learn from what's working and what isn't working for them. And these questions really should look very familiar to you, because regardless of what business you're in, all businesses have some key features in common. We all have to sell something to somebody, or we don't make any money. Whether we're selling for grant money, whether we're selling for government contracts, whether we're selling for business to business, business to consumer, we're selling something, which means our customers have certain characteristics in common. Those are the customer demographics that work for our business, and that's what we need to identify. So every business manager, every marketer knows those kinds of questions are key to being able to grow and maintain your business. So this is all old hat. What's different is we're using a different media. We're using social media. And a lot of businesses and business owners ignore that. They gloss over that. They say, oh, it's new, it's technology. It's not marketing, it's technology. Well, no, actually it's marketing. It is, was, and always will be. It's a different venue to market in. It has different rules of the road, but it's still marketing. So, if you're going to talk to people on that, you want to make sure the people you're talking to are most reflective of people who are likely to be your customers. These questions are standard. They don't change. So who is your customer? Well, the standard questions, you want to know age, gender, income, location, education. You can make a list of 10 or 20 more, but we know already, from what we've already seen in the last 2 episodes, that information about these particular demographics are available commonly, easily for most social networks. So if we just stick with that for the purposes of this discussion, that'll go a long way to answering a lot of our questions. So going back over the notes from the last couple of episodes, I just took from Ignite Social Media 2012's report their information and just correlated it into this little chart that you can see. So for the demographic of age, Facebook trends a little older than Twitter and YouTube, but not much. It's still in that 25 to 54, 35 to 54 range across the board. Gender, every single one of those 3 is predominantly female-driven market. It's a significant point to note. You'll also note that education is some college across the board. They all have a big spike in the some college listing. Income, although some may lean a little higher, a little lower within the band, the 2 most predominant income bands on all 3 of them is 25 to 75K. Location, this is all based on US stats, and for Facebook, it's 137.6 million in the US, according to their numbers, before you take out duplicates, or not duplicates, but that thing we were talking about yesterday where you have a page, from that page stems a business fan page and possibly a brand fan page and a bunch of others. that 137.6 is impacted by that number. So what the actual net user base is going to be lower than that by some degree. Twitter currently reaches 8% of Americans as Twitter users. And YouTube, the best guess I can find, or the best stats I can find from, in this case, a different site altogether, the Social Skinny, I'm finding 106 million users in the US. And all three of those stats are based on the idea that a unique user uses that social network a minimum of 1 time per month. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've seen a social status wall, you know that if you post something today, the odds that somebody's going to go back within the next month and look it up are pretty slim. So if they've missed it, and it's gone. What would be a much more useful stat is to see how many show up daily. And you'll see those numbers drop like a rock. That's the number that you're actually marketing to. And everybody else is extra. Everybody else is bonus. So I'll look up that information in the future, but at the moment this is the best information I can get for right now. So take a moment and take a look at those stats. Those three have largely very similar markets until you get to that location. And that point you're looking at between 8 and 30 odd % of the US marketplace visits those sites or uses those networks once per month or more. Are those really the demographics your business sells to? It could be. But certainly if you're doing business-to-business sales, that's very challenging to prove. If you're looking at business-to-consumer, there might be a relevancy to that. But again, we talked about how much of an impact that's having, and it's a little waffly as to whether those are the right places to put your investment. Let's take a look at Twitter as an example. So the average Twitter user has 126 followers. When they tweet a link at 9 a.m., on average, it gets 1.17% click-through rate. Roughly 1.4 users click the link. So you're lucky to have 2 people click your link. That's not a lot of follow-through. That doesn't tell you how many people actually saw it. That just tells you how many people clicked it. So you may have a branding value to it, but for the most part, it's in the ether. Next, over 40% of Twitters don't tweet anything at all, ever. They're not paying attention to that. There's no interaction. Here's a stunning, stunning fact. About 0.05% of the total Twitter population attracts almost 50% of the attention on the channel. Think about that for a second. If you want any volume of attention on Twitter, you've got to be doing something spectacular or highly media promoted if you're going to knock on the door of that 0.05%. Or take a look at the next bunch of stats to see what happens to the rest of the tweets. 71% of the millions of tweets each day attract no reaction. 25% of Twitters have no followers. 45% of the mass communication posted on Twitter are actual gobbledygook. It's nonsense. It's not even complete words. It's garbled posting by third-party automation software tools. I'm not going to make any accusations as to which ones, but most of it is spam-generated content, and it's junk. Again, 8% of Americans use Twitter. Twitter now has more than 140 million active users worldwide, sending 340 million tweets every day, or 1 billion tweets every 72 hours. So again, compare that 1 billion tweets every 72 hours versus the 0.05% of active users getting half the attention, and you're not going to see any real value to your tweets unless you've got something that can hit it out of the park, or unless you have built up those connections to that 0.05%. That's how you can leverage Twitter. You have to network Twitter. Again, all this particular information is directly sourced from the socialskinny.com, and they have a long range of very robust and accredited sources for most of this data, including things like Forbes and Google and whatnot. Here's another stat that's kind of important and impressive. The average status update on virtually any social media has a half-life of between 2.8 and 3.4 hours. Twitter's about 2.8. Facebook, I think, is 3.2. And I think LinkedIn might be 3.4. There's some combination in there. But on average, it's somewhere in that range. So using Twitter as an example, if you tweet something at 9 a.m. East Coast time, and then you want to make sure that it covers both the East and West Coast and everything in between, you'll have to repost that post again at 12 noon if you're going to catch the 9 a.m. crowd on the West Coast. So it's that significant an issue, because once you start reposting the same tweet, all of the search engines start dinging you for repetitive content. You're not retweeting, you're not doing any of that stuff, you're simply reposting the same tweet. So that becomes an issue. Plus, now all the people who are following you on the East Coast are getting annoyed because you're posting the same stuff over and over again. They've already seen it the first time, they don't really want to see it the second time, and now you're getting into this East Coast, West Coast issue. How do you handle that? Have you thought about it? What are you going to do to control it, to manage it? Do you have an East Coast version and a West Coast version? You got to think about this stuff. Now we're going to take a look, as I said, about small business and big business and see how each one is handling this, the whole social networking issue. Now it says 53% of small businesses are using social media, period. And the vast majority believe exposure is the biggest benefit they're going to get out of it. Look at the next bunch of stats specifically. 19% of them use Facebook, 15% use LinkedIn, and 4% use Twitter. That's on Twitter alone, that's half the national average of users. So that's a big drop. Small businesses don't tend to use Twitter much. Big point, especially since small business is like 80% of all businesses out there. It's kind of a significant point if you're trying to reach the vast majority of businesses. Next, 12% think it's a must, 24% do it when they have time, and 14% say they don't know enough about it to even bother. Among online retailers, only 33% have metrics in place to track social media ROI. 1 in 3. All right, now we're going to flip this over and see what the big businesses do. 65% of the world's top companies have an active Twitter profile. Compare that to small businesses we just saw at 4%. Big business believes in Twitter. We're not quite sure why, but they believe in Twitter. 90% of marketers use social media channels for business, with 93% of those rating social tools as important. So, big business believes social media tools are important. Small business, 12% think it's must have, and everybody else says, if I have to, I guess. That's a huge difference. 43% of marketers for bigger businesses have noticed an improvement in sales due to social campaigns. 72% who've worked in social media for at least 3 years said they saw a boost in turnover due to social channels. In other words, the longer you're working at it, the better you get. So as a small, mid, or large-sized business, how experienced is your team? Is the average experience well over 3 years? I'm betting not. You might want to think about that a little bit when you're hiring. Next, 91% of experienced social marketers see improved website traffic due to social media campaigns. We just talked about that yesterday, didn't we? The vast majority, 75%, of all CMOs believe that the number one benefit or ROI that you can get from a social media campaign is in fact increased web traffic. They're showing that 91% were successful at achieving that. 79% were successful at generating more quality leads. Now, again, as you know, I just came off a contract with SAP, and one of the big issues or concerns is how to generate more of those quality leads, and they were doing very well at that, through the website due to social media, because the conversion rates are much, much higher even than the paid leads from the call centers and whatnot that generate leads for you. So value-wise, big business sees massive value in social media. Even if they're going to the wrong ones, they're still getting better out of it as a result. Imagine what would happen if they went to the right ones. Whoa. That could be a whole economic turnaround right there on its own, couldn't it? Now, the average time spent by marketers on social media is between 1 and 5 hours per week for those just getting started, and well over 6 hours per week for those with 3 years or more of experience. Where do you fall into line in that? Are you promoting your business a few hours a week? Or are you hardcore putting in time to make sure you're getting as much exposure from this as you can? There's a big difference in there, and the results, as you just saw, are dramatically impacted by it. As far as overall business social networking, number one king for business is Facebook, being used by 92%. Compare that to small business at 12 or 15%. That's a big difference. Followed by Twitter, 84%, LinkedIn at 71%, and blogs at 68%. And YouTube hardly rates by comparison. Another fact, and we talked about it before, LinkedIn is 4 times better for business-to-business lead generation than Facebook and Twitter combined. And that's been true now for a couple of years. Here's another stunning fact for big business. Only 10% of marketers are actively monitoring social media ROI. Compared to small business retail, or e-tail, I guess, they're at a third of all the marketers in small business are looking for ROI and tracking it. Only 10% in bigger businesses. That's stunning. Only 22% of businesses have a dedicated social media manager of any kind. Think about that for a minute. With a volume of communication and the fact that you're getting 80% or 79% more quality leads through social media campaigns driving traffic to your website, why aren't these businesses hiring experienced social media managers? Sometimes it's because they don't really have a wide selection to pick from. It's still a fairly new technology or platform. So as a result, there are not that many of us out there who are highly qualified or highly experienced or highly knowledgeable at it. So you don't necessarily have a huge pool to pick from. But people are catching on fast in terms of usability. Now, are they qualified as experts? Not likely. But that doesn't mean there isn't a volume of people becoming more aware and knowledgeable about this. And seriously, if you wanted to pick good quality social media managers, you can find them. You can always call me and email me. Happy to help out. 23% of Fortune 500 companies have a public-facing corporate blog. Now, first off, anybody with a brain knows that your corporate blog is one of the best ways of driving traffic to your website. It is loved by search engines. It is a great way of being able to generate comments, head off customer service issues, ramp up new sales and campaigns, encourage new people to hire on, encourage stock price to be encouraged. All of those things that are relevant to business management are relevant to a corporate blog. So what the other 77% are doing, Lord only knows. But 58% of Fortune 500 companies have an active corporate Facebook account. 62% have an active corporate Twitter account. Now compare that number to what we saw on social media for small business at, again, that 12 to 15% range. Or, in case of Twitter, 4%. 4 versus 62, that's a heck of a whopping difference. And when you realize that 47% of customers are somewhat likely to purchase from a brand that they follow or like in social media, there's an active need to get your brand in front of those customers. 80% of US social network users prefer to connect with brands through Facebook. Notice they said connect with brands, not see advertising, not get spammed. They like to connect with brands. It's an important distinction. Maybe you've seen those social logins where you can log into a site with your social network link instead of creating a brand new username and password for it. 40% of consumers prefer that process over creating a new or guest account. And in terms of users engaging with social logins, 60% prefer to use Facebook, 12% Yahoo, 11% Twitter, 10% Google, and 7% LinkedIn. Not a big to-do, but it's becoming more a customer service feature for helping log into your sites and your campaigns and competitions. Were you as blown away by that comparison, that stark difference between small business and every other business? Some things small business is doing right. They're doing more of the social media ROI tracking. They're doing a lot more in terms of engaging in other social media. Because if you go back to that, if more than half of small businesses are using social media, but only 20% of those are using Facebook, what are the others using? Even if you count the Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter as separate, that's 34, 38%. So, again, what's going on with the other 25%? They're going to other social networks. 25 is bigger than any of those numbers on that line at all. 25 is bigger than the number who use Facebook, it's bigger than the number who use LinkedIn, and it's bigger than the number who use Twitter. If you're trying to do business-to-business sales, that means more people are using other social networks than they are using any one of those. It's worth looking at other social networks for other business-to-business sales. And the stats are right here in front of you. It's dramatic how different these things are and what the businesses are looking at in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So if we take a look at the idea of business-to-business sales, I went ahead and took a look at employment statistics in the top 5 industry sectors in the Phoenix metro area. Now, the U.S. Census Bureau didn't have the 2010 stats out yet, but I have 2007 and 2002 factored in here. And in Phoenix, in that market, you have the number one employer, the number one for businesses, is administrative and support and waste management and remediation services. I don't know how that all combines together as to one, but for some reason that happens to be lumped in as one NAICS code. And number of employees in 2007 was 230,000 and change. In 2002 it was 159. So that's a massive increase in that over that 5-year window. What it is today, knowing Phoenix as well as I do, that number could be higher or lower, and we have no way of knowing. But assume it's about the same. The payroll per employee is 31,000, etc., as an average. Well, if you're looking to speak to the average employee at those locations, then you're looking at between, in this case, accommodation, food services, and finance, between 15,000 and 55,000. That fits well into those 3 social media, the Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. But if you're doing business to business, odds are you're not selling to this market. You're selling to the managers. So I also looked up from the Bureau of Labor Statistics what demographics they had available for managers in those industries. So administrative service managers, which was the number one category there, you require high school diploma or equivalent, and you start at $77,000 and change as the median pay. So you're looking for people who are higher at the ballpark than any of the ones that those three social media attract. So I thought, well, how about compensation and benefits managers? Now, you can't see this on the screen, but it requires a bachelor's degree, and it's almost $90,000 a year. Again, it's outside of the financial range of the primary demographics of those three sites. Architectural and engineering managers need bachelor's degree and $120K. Advertising, promotions, and marketing, bachelor's degree and $108K. The vast majority of these require a bachelor's degree or better, and financially are higher than $75K. And if you go take a look, you'll see that averages out with the bulk of the Phoenix top 5 industries. So again, we're going to compare that to these three social networks. Bachelor's degree, bachelor's degree, bachelor's degree. Well, doesn't fit any of that. And economically, the lowest one was 79K, so, or sorry, 77K. So none of these is in that wheelhouse. This is the top fraction for each of those three networks. So you're pitching to the wrong education, the wrong income level, and largely the wrong city, because of course Phoenix doesn't have the same kind of social networking impact on those three sites as LA, New York, or Chicago have. So I'm struggling to see how pitching on those three social networks in Phoenix, for example, is necessarily the best use of your economic budget for social media marketing. Unless it's business to consumer, in which case maybe that changes entirely. You have to take a look at what the demographics of what you sell are and compare it to what these social networks actually do. But see how dramatically different that is between what your business-to-business relationship is versus your business-to-consumer versus city-to-city. Do you see how dramatically different that is when you take a look at the actual hard numbers for each of these social networks? It's dramatic. So why are you marketing to people who won't buy your stuff? Maybe they'll get promoted in the next 5 years, but before then, you may be reaching out to exactly the wrong market. Remember, 3/4 of all chief marketing officers will increase their marketing to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube this year. From what we just saw, yep, that's a good plan. How many of them, especially the business-to-business ones, stand a ghost hope and heck of hitting the right market simply by upping the volume on those three social networks? Maybe they need to hire a little more experienced social media manager to get a little better handle on that. What's a smarter answer? Well, use a CRM system and find out who your customers really are or should be. If you don't know what CRM is, customer relationship management, it tracks all of your customer activity from before they become a customer, when they're just a lead or a prospect in the pipeline, all the way through the entire customer life cycle. And it tells you what their buying habits are, what the patterns of purchases are, what the status of the contract is. It tells you all sorts of data that you need to be able to run your business. So take a look at what it takes to get that information. Most CRM systems, not most, but a lot of CRM systems that are extraordinarily well functional are free. It's not even going to cost your company any money to use them. And it can really simplify a lot of your billing and accounting and some of your social networking as well. Then go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website and find out what others in those jobs have in common. What are the demographics that are in common? Find out where those people work, what cities, from the business.census.gov site, so you have a better idea of which cities have higher concentrations of the kinds of customers you want to talk to. Then learn how to market effectively on the right social media for those demographics. I'm not saying don't use Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. You use those because they have lots of great functionality. And it's not like people don't know they exist, and it's not like people won't connect to you on those. But if you're going to drive traffic, drive it from where the right people are to those sites. That means you need to expand what you think the role of social media is and what kinds and how many social networks you need to engage in to be effective at what you're doing. So I hope that was as interesting for you as it was for me. Again, this has been the third episode, our customer acquisition strategies, for the mega series called Social Revelations. Tomorrow, again, another awesome show on the way. I can't wait to share it with you. But for now, I'm signing off. This is Chris Kerr with The Morning Charge.